we are going to go to a younger player with a lot of questions, maybe because a lot of people don't know much about him. We go to, in this particular name here, go to the G League Ignite. And we go with Ron Holland, the 18-year-old 6'7" forward that we're going to throw at Derek Bodner right now.
Yeah, that's a guy that Kyle's been referencing that I am higher on than I think everybody else. Went to G League Ignite, was pretty much your top option for most of the year, was initiating a lot, and I think real early on in the season, he looked completely overmatched. Like, some of the turnovers were bad. It looked like he was getting sped up, trying to do too much, driving too deep in the defense. And the shooting is it's bad. It's bad right now. Now, part of that, I think, is they play at the NBA line. They play farther back than college players do, so I think that transition can be tough. You usually see players go from college to the NBA and struggle, so I think distance is part of that. I think part of it is the fact that he is self-creating more than he probably ever will in his life and more than he did in high school. I don't think he's a lead guard. I think he's a 3 or a 4 at his peak. If he works out, I think he's still like a third option kind of creator. But I think that kind of brought up a lot of his weaknesses and masked a lot of his strengths. And I do think, like, if you start off from a defensive standpoint, I think he is the best defender in this group by a pretty wide margin.
I really think that's easy too.
I think his combination, he's just under 6'6" without shoes, 6'11" wingspan, 8'8" reach. His measurables are great. His intensity is great. He moves his feet well defensively. I think he's got the tools to be an impact defender, both in terms of man-to-man on the perimeter and also being a switchable defender as well. And I think when you start talking about Holland, that is where it starts. So then it comes down to, all right, well, if you get him away from the creation that he was doing a lot in the G League, get him into like an off-ball role, which is going to have to involve shooting. And right now he's not there yet. 24% on catch and shoot shots last year, 27.4% off the dribble. That's not nearly good enough. I don't think the form is a complete disaster, but I also think there's a lot of like pre-shot footwork that needs to improve. His balance seems like is off. Things that I think he can learn. I don't think it's a complete lost cause, but there is a lot of progress that needs to be made. But if he can do that, and he's playing, like I said, a spot-up role, an attack closeouts role, an occasional creation role, an occasional slashing role, I think he has a chance to do that. I think he's got the leaping ability to be, like I said, a cutter. I think he's willing to take and absorb contact. Like I said, the defensive tools are best among this group. And I even think he has some passing upside, just not as a primary guy like he was there. I think he was in a bad spot with the Ignite. I think the tools are there. And if there's any, like I said, I'm either going for the safe pick into Silva, or I'm going with the high upside guy in Holland.
Swing for the fences.
One of the two, and he is my upside guy.
So I want to ask you this, Derek, while we're on the topic of the shot, because I want to see if I'm imagining this from what I watched. It felt like he was better and more comfortable as a pull-up guy than a catch and shoot guy.
But he wasn't good either.
He's not good at either, but the mechanics and the whole shooting process looked more natural.
He was very hesitant as a catch and shoot guy.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that he was creating so much of their offense, but part of it's just, he's just not confident in that shot. And I do think you're probably right in terms of like using 1 or 2 dribbles. Didn't necessarily improve the effectiveness, but it seemed like it maybe put him into a more of a comfort zone, is the way I would phrase it.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't something I imagined. It just kind of jumped out at me a little bit. So to Derek's point, the things that you like about him, I think he's a physical player who wants to use those tools, all those athletic tools, because there are a lot of guys that, like, plenty of guys throughout NBA history had great wingspan, great athletic tools, and
had no
you
interest
still have
in
to
defending.
Like beg them to defend. I don't think there's that. I don't think you're going to get a lot of those, head in the clouds, I'm lost off ball moments. I think if anything, he probably skews toward not quite as far, but into that like Thibault camp of over aggression. He's going to take some silly fouls. I'll run through people, and he's going to over pursue. But I would rather deal with that problem and work on the process of reining him in and saying, hey, like, not every play needs to be a steal, a block, a jump into a passing lane, or trying to rip a guy with his handle. But I think the fact that he takes defense as personally as he does is a really good sign. And we were talking about it with the guards yesterday. That also gives him a pretty immediate path to playing. If he wants to and will defend right away, that would be excellent. So that's good. He's a good transition player.
Great transition player.
So that's how he made a lot of his meals in on the G League Ignite. Unfortunately, I just do not believe in him at all as a half court player. Don't believe in the shot. Shot like, what was it, 24% on catch and shoot shots, which is just absolutely disgusting. The mechanics we talked about. I think the problem with the lack of a jumper is I don't really love him as an on-ball guy. You have to limit him to a lot of just like catch, go. And as I was talking about with Collier, who's a guy I do like at US as a guard, he runs into those problems that Collier does or did at USC where he doesn't want to take the shots or the release is too slow to take the shot. And then you just dribble into traffic and there's nowhere to go. And I think the difference between him and Collier is at least like he's below average. Holland is a straight up bad shooter. And he's one that he'll be on the scouting report, like, do not guard. And that could turn into, you're just letting that guy stand in the corner and bomb away. And they could junk up your offense in a big way. To the point I was making earlier, though, that Devon was talking about the pro-ready guys versus, I do think if you want to make the upside case for him, to Derek's point, I think that Ignite team, that situation was a fucking disaster for him. Asking him to be like a 28% usage guy is just complete bananas. It was something he'd never done. And if you go back to, obviously he played at a high level playing for Team USA. He's a really good high school player, has a lot of good priors. So if you believe in those priors, if you say, okay, he was one of the best players in his class, he chose this path and looks like it just flamed out and didn't work for him at all. And now there are all these questions about him that didn't necessarily exist before. You would say, okay, we're at pick 16. We're a team that's not expecting to be, a lottery team or even like a top 20 pick team year in and year out. Why not just swing for the fences? And so that part I get. These are the types of players I used to say, you just got to learn how to shoot. And I've watched so many of them, they just never get there. Like, even if they get there, it's a low volume, 34, 35%. And once you get to the playoffs, I just don't think they'll guard him. So I don't believe in him.
Absolutely a chance that happens.
Look, I hope he gets there because I love guys who buy in like he does defensively. I want him to make it. I just don't know if I see it.
If he had a projectable jump shot with confidence, he would be a top 5 to 7
Yes.
pick. And really, if you're trying to carve out a role for him, the only thing he has to improve on is a set shot. Obviously, everything needs a little bit of growth and development, but in terms of a significant tweak, the only thing that really needs to improve dramatically is a jump shot. And I think he's, a lot of guys you say like, all right, well, you'll just scale back his offense. Well, a lot of guys, A, don't want to scale back their offense, and B, like you mentioned, aren't going to buy in defensively to where that's realistically going to be an impact player on a scaled back third or fourth option. I think he will. So it's legitimately, if you can just make him into a good spot up shooter, then you have a really good role player for a long time, and probably a player who has more than role player upside. But it's a massive question for sure. It's a massive question.
We all silly like the mayor.